Hello and welcome to a conversation on the Daily Bern. I'm your host, Eric Miller, joined today by an awesome progressive candidate for Florida State Attorney of the Ninth Circuit, which is, what is it, Osceola, Orange County? Um,
Orange and Osceola counties.
that's right. And Monique Worrell. How you doing, Monique?
Hello, hello, hello. I am amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
You are amazing. Indeed, you are. And you're in your car because you're out for early voting. Is that right?
Yes, early voting began in Florida today, and I was going around to all the polls to say hello to the voters and to make sure that everything was on the up and up. And earlier this morning, I joined a rally with Kamala Harris, who came to Orange County to kick off early voting. So, yeah.
Amazing. Wow, that's great. And it's any issues? Are there long lines? Like what's it look like?
So surprisingly, I did see long lines, and I really didn't expect that to be the case because in the primary, that wasn't the case. But there were several polls that I went to today that the lines were very long.
Hmm. Hopefully that's a good sign, right? I think it's a good
Yeah.
sign. All the numbers I've been hearing from other candidates, it's a good sign.
I hope so. I really do.
Right on. Yeah, and Kamala Harris endorsed you. Bernie Sanders endorsed you. John Legend endorsed you. Real
Yeah.
Justice PAC, which is Sean King's PAC, is they do amazing work. They endorsed you. I'm sure I'm missing Van Jones. I'm sure I'm missing hundreds of other endorsements. But I want to talk about your platform. You I get you made it through the primary, and I think you're running unopposed in the general. There is a write-in candidate, possibly. Is that right?
No, I'm running against an independent, and his name will actually be on the ballot. He's not a write-in.
Okay. Okay. So I didn't do any research on him, but let's just assume he's terrible, and you're obviously infinitely better.
It
Um,
is safe to assume he is terrible. He could not be further from what we need in our criminal legal system.
Good. Good. Yeah, and I want to talk about that, and but the first thing I want to ask is, what motivated you to get into law? You have a 20 plus year of justice reform background, probation reform, and so forth. But what inspired you initially to get into this area of work? What motivated you?
So, just to be, totally transparent, my family was impacted by the criminal legal system. My oldest brother, who's a veteran of the United States Air Force, was diagnosed with PTSD and bipolar disorder. He was given medication that later led to him developing an addiction. And as a result of that addiction, he spent most of my life in and out of the criminal legal system. And I knew from a very young age that that wasn't right, that we should not be incarcerating someone who has a diagnosed mental illness as well as a substance addiction, and that we should do better. So, because of that, I was inspired to get into the law profession and went directly through law school to the public defender's office. That was all I wanted to do. I didn't apply for any other jobs. That's what I wanted to do with my career. And from there, I went into private practice. And from there, I went into legal education, training lawyers how to become practitioners of criminal law. And then I became an assistant state attorney where I investigated claims of wrongful conviction before joining the Reform Alliance as chief legal officer, where we worked on probation and parole reform. So the entire trajectory of my career was based off of my personal experience with the criminal legal system.
Right. Amazing. Yeah, and that's before we go at the end, I'm going to play a video that I think the Sanders campaign put together, and you share a little bit of that story in there as well. So after the interview, stick around for that. I will say your website also, Monique for stateattorney.com. Monique could use, donations, volunteers, and so forth, right? You're on the ballot for November 3rd. I'll pull that up and I'll
Yeah.
mention that, as we go. But, just a little bit of background on the Ninth Circuit, right? So your website is really incredible. It's got all kinds of statistics, and I'm not going to ask you to cite all those, but just kind of in a nutshell, like what are you up against? Like what historically has the Ninth Circuit look like in terms of criminal justice and school to prison pipeline and so forth?
So the Ninth Circuit has pretty much been in line with the rest of the state. And that is that we all know that as a country, the United States incarcerates more people than anywhere in the world. But here in the state of Florida, we do it at a rate higher than the national average, and the Ninth
Mm,
Circuit is not exempt from that. And what that means is that we have increased our prison population by 300% since the 1970s, to
wow.
the tune of $2.4 billion a year. But what that really breaks down to is that African Americans make up only 19% of our community, but 50% of our prison population. And that's not because African Americans commit more crime. It's because African Americans are more heavily policed, more frequently charged, more harshly charged, and then more harshly sentenced than their Caucasian counterparts. And that's not justice. That's not fairness. That's not equality. And we have to be intentional about changing that if we're serious about having a justice system.
Right on. Yeah. Yeah. And again, your website has a lot of that detailed, and it's, I mean, that's just heartbreaking. And, like you said, you witnessed it firsthand in your family. Can you talk a little bit about, it doesn't get discussed a whole lot, the dehumanization of that, what that really, we can talk about statistics, and I do want to ask about unions and the culture of statistics. What does that look like in terms of just the humanity of the people that get caught up in that, if you will?
Well, unfortunately, it's dehumanizing. That's what our criminal legal process does. So, from the moment that we bring someone into the system, prosecutors are trained to not call in individuals who are charged with crime by their name. So, they refer to them as defendant. And when
And
they go to jail, yeah.
sorry, and the justification for that is, why would they choose that? Sorry to interrupt, but
No, that's okay, because they are taught to dehumanize so that when they issue these ridiculous sentences, they don't feel anything because they don't feel like they're dealing with a human being. And having
Mhm.
been in the profession of being a legal educator, I have seen that this is what they're trained. They're trained to not call the accused by their name, but to call them defendant. And when we send them to jail, they're not called Mr. or Mrs. So and so, they're called inmate. And when we send them to prison, they're called by a number. But when they come home in 3 to 5 years, as most of them will, we expect them to behave like citizens when for all that time we've told them that they are not. Right.
Right.
So it is counterproductive. Our system is counterproductive, and it's not building stronger, safer communities. It's not making us any safer. It's leading to recidivism, and it's increasing crime within our communities.
Yeah. Boy, and how do you unwind that when someone gets back, out of the system? Like you said, it probably contributes to recidivism. Is there anything, for the office that you're running for? Is there any programs to unwind that? Like, how can we improve that?
So for me, I plan to change the culture of prosecution. And because of my experience as an educator, I believe that I am best suited to do that because I know what it is that they've learned to do. So I know how to train them to unlearn that. And that is one of the first things that I'll be instituting is a training program within my office, a very robust training program that will teach the principles of humanity in prosecution, because these are human beings and none of us are, you know, we are not the worst thing that we've ever done. And what we see are people at their worst. So we have to recognize that and treat people like people so that we can build stronger, safer communities with people who won't recidivate, but that they will learn from their mistakes and they will go on to lead productive lives.
Wow, that's great. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, excessive sentencing is another aspect that needs reformation. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So the best example I have of that is oh gosh, I can't think of his name right now because there's so many. Botham Jean, I think is his name, the
Mhm.
gentleman who was killed in his own apartment by a off-duty law enforcement officer who said that she thought it was her apartment and she went in there and she killed him. Um, she was sentenced to 10 years in prison, and people were outraged because they were like, 10 years, that's not long enough. She should have gotten longer. And, I wanted people to see things just a little bit differently. Not that I believe that under the current circumstances, 10 years was long enough for the murder of Botham Jean, but I wanted people to understand and appreciate the fact that 10 years is a lengthy prison sentence. 10 years is not something that we should frown upon. 10 years actually would be a justifiable sentence for someone who accidentally committed a murder, right? The reason that we don't think it is because we as a society sentence people to decades and decades of time in prison. So when we see someone who's sentenced for 10 years, we sneeze at that and we don't think that that is a sufficient sentence for the commission of a crime. And what that is an example of over sentencing in our society. We are sentencing people to prison sentences for far too long for the crimes that they commit. And there's nowhere to go but up from there. So we just keep going and we keep going. We see this in the war on drugs. We have people who are in prison for life for marijuana. Why? Why, especially now when marijuana is legal, right? So what I want to see is us to come down and understand it. Even as an educator, I did this with my students who would be prosecutors. I sent them to the prisons and I sent them to the jails because I believe that if you are going to work in this profession, you must have a realistic understanding of what that sentence is that you were doling out. And as a defense attorney, when I had prosecutors who would want to send my client to to jail for 60 days or 90 days or 120 days for driving with a suspended license, that said to me that they had no real understanding of what it was that they were sentencing the individual to.
Right. Yeah, there's, is there a culture of, and maybe I just gleaned this from watching too many episodes of The Wire, is there a culture of statistic driven motivation in terms of, incarceration?
I don't believe so. I am the only candidate in my race who referred to statistics and data. So I don't believe that we have ever and this is amazing to me because you have a whole study that's criminology, right? You have people who do this for a living. So why we wouldn't then use that data to inform the decisions that we make in our criminal legal system is beyond me. It doesn't make any sense to me. And, I was on a forum with my opponent and he was talking about how, things are not as bad as I say they are. And I pulled out the statistics. Well, here's what the statistics say, because this is not my opinion. And this is not based on my limited window of experience. This is statistics that is based upon people who research and study and put together these numbers for us to use at our disposal. And that was just like a foreign concept.
Wow. And so then that makes me think that if you don't want to see it, right? So it's a bit of a denial. Even the predecessor, the current holder of the office, is a colleague of yours. Has she been fighting that same fight?
What's interesting and unique about her is, first of all, she was the first African-American state attorney elected in the state of Florida. She did not run on a progressive platform because she could not have won on a progressive platform. A progressive prosecutor is a very new dynamic that began probably just within the last 4 years. So I am in a unique position because I can run on a progressive platform and actually win, as I did in the primary, whereas she could not. So I will be standing upon her shoulders and trying to implement policies that she could not because of the way she was situated when she ran for the office.
Right on. Yeah, like Larry Krasner in Philadelphia. He's local to me, inspirational on this front. Let me just pull up your website real quickly and make a plea for donations, right? So
yes,
it's MoniqueForStateAttorney.com. You have a lovely donate button right there. All of her platform, is laid out here in the issues, tons of endorsements if you want to go see a lot of celebrity faces and so forth. But all those statistics that you mentioned are all outlined there. And, since I'm here, I just want to pull up the Real Justice PAC, which is, Sean King, I think, kicked this off. I don't know who all's on the team, but, there's additional candidates. You're not the only progressive candidate running for an attorney seat. So go there and check out additional candidates around the country. Some haven't made it through yet, but there's some outstanding. Maricopa County, that would be a huge one, right? So go check out Real Justice PAC as well. But of course, donate to Monique first. So I just wanted to pull that up, MoniqueForStateAttorney.com.
Yes.
And your full platform is in there as well. Let me ask a little bit about one of those components, one of those planks in your platform is treating kids as kids. I guess age. Just talk about that. Treating kids as kids. What does that mean for you?
So here in Orange County, we had the distinction of putting a 6-year-old in handcuffs. I think it was an embarrassment, an atrocity, and something that we should be embarrassed about.
It's on video.
Criminalized. Yeah. We have criminalized childhood is what we've done. And now children can be arrested for things that are just a part and course of normal childhood behavior. And as a mother of 3 sons, that, concerns me greatly. And as a citizen of Orange County, that concerns me greatly, not just for my children, but for all the children here. Because we now have more law enforcement officers in school, what we are seeing is that more children are being arrested for things that would be typical and in line with normal childhood development.
Right.
And, such as getting in school fights or breaking into cars. Not that any of those things are okay or that they should be condoned,
Of course.
but the criminal justice system is not the venue with which for us to deal with those things. So my platform that says we're going to treat kids like kids is that we are going to divert children out of the criminal justice system as often as we can. As often as we can. We can't always, right? Because we have some kids who are killing people and that we have to deal with. But outside of death or some, very serious violent crime, we're going to divert children out of the criminal justice system as often as we possibly can to connect them to the resources that can help to address whatever issues that they have that cause them to act out and then become productive citizens. Because what people don't talk about is the fact that when we send children to prison, they are victimized. They will be raped. They will be beaten. They will be abused. And we don't agree that that's okay to happen to children outside of the context of prison. So why would we then say it's okay to happen to kids that we incarcerate? It's not okay. And I'm going to do something about it.
Right on. Yeah. I mean, those cops in schools, if you have a hammer, everything's a nail, right? But that's sort of a legislative issue. But pile that underage thing with the dehumanization thing. If that's happening at such a young age, how impossible would it be for a kid that broke into a car to overcome that, right? You're sort of, that's the school to prison pipeline. That's terrible. I'm preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
So let me ask about, some of the obstacles that you might come up against, right? So, critics of yours, of which I am definitely not one, but critics would say, you're lenient or, that type of thing. You're probably going up against a culture of police union and, thin blue wall and all that type of stuff. So, how do you answer critics, on those issues?
I'm not soft on crime. I'm smart on crime. We've used this tough on crime, law and order rhetoric for decades. And the only thing that we have to show for it is a 300% increase in our prison system, a $2.4 billion prison budget in the state of Florida, and we still have crime. Prison is not a deterrent. If it was, then we wouldn't have increased our prison population. So it's time for us to do something different if we in fact want to get something different.
That's right. Great. Yeah. What a great point about, if it were effective as a deterrent, the numbers wouldn't be increasing year over year, right? Yeah. What a great point. How about private prisons? Is that, I'm assuming that is part of the motivation, part of, I'm assuming the establishment that you're going to sort of bump up against is probably in bed or takes bribes. I'm going to just say it straight out from private prisons. how do you, again, you won't be a legislator, but how can you combat that in a state attorney role?
I can use my voice in the legislature to let them know what my positions are on those issues, and I can let the voters know what their positions are on those issues. Yeah, it's privatized prisons, but it's also the individuals who have contracts with prisons, right?
Right.
Because what people don't know is that for those of us who have family members in prison, we have to pay a lot of money to talk to our family members. We have to pay to email our family members. We have to pay to stay in communication with them. And when there was visitation, we have to pay for them to eat at visitation, or we have to pay to eat at visitation. So all of these things go to contractors who are making money off the backs of individuals who are suffering. And there is lots of money to be made in the prison industry. And that is not a reason for us to continue modern day slavery, because that's what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, there's a great documentary in the 13th documentary. They talk about that, right? All the
Yeah.
ancillary profiteering from private prisons. And you have 20 plus years fighting that fight, probation reform, various roles. Again, it's on her website, moniqueforstateattorney.com. Make a donation. Can you just cite one thing in that long history? I'm putting you on the spot with this one. What is one accomplishment in that long resume of yours fighting this just fight that you are super proud of?
Winning the Democratic nomination for state attorney. Listen, I did not prepare my life around a run for state attorney. This is not something that I ever thought that I would do. And as you can see from my history, I've spent most of my time as a defense lawyer fighting the system from where I thought I would be most effective, and that was as a defender of the people.
Right.
When I went to work at the state attorney's office as director of conviction integrity, I learned really that the power is on the state side, and the power to implement policies that would accomplish the things that I had been fighting for 20 years. They were in the seat of the state attorney, and that's what made me run. And when the people said yes, when they said, yes, we believe in what you're saying, we believe that it's time for this change, that is really my proudest accomplishment of my career, because it's not something that I ever set out to do. And it's something that the people propelled me towards. And I look forward to bringing all of those things that I promised to fruition here as I hopefully will take over the seat if I win in November for state attorney.
Amazing. What a great answer. So, and you'll win. Monique for stateattorney.com. That independent guy, he's a clown. We don't even need to talk about him. How, before we go, like I said, I do want to close on that Bernie video.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about holding police accountable, right? Because that is a growing movement. There's been a long history of that, but now it's all caught on camera, right? And even despite it being caught on camera, they're still not held to account, right? So how do we change that? What can you do? What can we all do to increase police accountability?
We have to remember that police are human. Far too long as a defense attorney, I would be in situations where if the law enforcement officer said it, then everyone believed it, and that was the end of the story. I had the hardest time when I had law enforcement officers as witnesses testifying against my clients, because the tendency of the entire system, judges, prosecutors, and jurors, is to unequivocally believe anything that a law enforcement officer says. And what I want people to think is, within your own profession, you have people who do the work that you do who are honest, and people who do the work that you do that are dishonest. You have people who do the work that you do that are good people, and you have people who do the work that you do that are not good people. The profession of law enforcement is no different. And the reality is that when we cover up for those individuals who are dishonest and who are not good people, then we tarnish the credibility of all of those who are good people and who are honest. So by holding those individuals accountable, we increase the trust between the community and law enforcement, and we also increase the integrity of the profession. So as state attorney, I will redefine the relationship between law enforcement and the state attorney's office, and that I must partner with them to make stronger, safer communities. But I will do that even if it means prosecuting one of their own, because my number one priority is justice in our community. And I will achieve justice even when I have to do it by holding law enforcement accountable. These murders are inexcusable, and I, we have to change the way we do things. It cannot continue to be business as usual.
Yeah. Here. I wonder, not to push back on that, but I wonder, you watch through the summer all kinds of police brutality. There was that clip of, just the stormtroopers marched over that old man who fell and hit his head, right? I can't remember his name, forgive me, but then the other police just walked over him, right? Which was so indicative of the culture of cover up, right? And I wonder how can you affect change against such a institutionalized, blue wall? What you said, I agree with 1,000%, right? But sometimes I'm optimistic about it, sometimes I'm pessimistic about it, right? When I see officers just step over a prone man bleeding from his head, right? How can you change the culture that they would instinctively, they internalize it so much that they just continued marching. They didn't stop to assist as a human would, right? To talk about dehumanization. How do you, and maybe you don't have the answer, but how can that change?
By prosecuting the bad cops.
Right on.
That's the problem. That's the reason that they would do that. That's the reason that those officers stood by while George Floyd was murdered by another officer, because there is no accountability. But when there becomes accountability, now everyone must think, how am I culpable in what's going to happen next? And if I'm going to be culpable, I got to go home to my family. So I'm not going to let this guy commit a crime in front of me. I'm going to stop him. Right. So now we shift the culture, because
Right.
before, those officers were afraid to say anything because of what would happen within the department. But what would happen within the department is now going to butt up against what's going to happen to my freedom. Because if I don't stop this crime from happening, then I am culpable in the commission of this crime. And that changes everything.
Right on. Yeah. If you're not going to be a good apple, you're going to be, culpable as a bad apple.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well said. Let me ask, is there anybody else on your slate in your district as you're out? You said you were at a Kamala Harris event today. Anybody else that you want to make mention of that's running in your district? Anybody that you support?
Yeah, so we have Senator Randolph Bracy who's running. We have Representative Geraldine Thompson that's running. We have Representative Anna Escamani that's running. We have Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith that's running. So there are amazing superstars who are on the ballot along with me this term. We have Pasha Baker who's running out in Seminole County, and take a look and go out and vote. If you don't live in Florida, and if you don't live in the Ninth Judicial Circuit, tell a friend who does. Get them out to vote so that we can actually make a difference in our community.
Here, here. Yeah. And then, again, Monique for stateattorney.com, go follow her socials, and, Real Justice PAC and so forth. Like you said, it's a relatively new thing to have progressive attorneys and prosecutors. And, so, the more we get in, it begets more, right? So, go support people like Monique that are running around the country, because that's the front line. That's how, we all watched 13th and we all hated what we saw, but, people like Monique can get in there and effectuate change, right?
Yes.
Through us, right? Through our votes and our activism and so forth. So, I thank you for your long career heretofore, and thank you for running. Godspeed. I can't, I'll be looking for the results on November 3rd. I can't wait to see, you pick up that seat and, start making some change for the positive in your circuit. I think that's absolutely incredible. And thanks for taking some time to chat with me today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Again, it's Monique for stateattorney.com. Go donate. And I'm going to close on a video that the Bernie Sanders campaign put together, I guess, earlier in the year. It gives a little bit of profile about your history and so forth, which is just incredible. So good luck on November 3rd, Monique. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, Godspeed. Hope you'll come back when you're in office as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Your coworker, your colleague, your neighbor, your friend could have someone who's currently incarcerated, and we're not okay. Like many Americans, my family was personally impacted by the criminal legal system. When I was 9 years old, the first time I remember my brother being involved in the criminal legal system. He is a veteran of the United States Air Force who was diagnosed with PTSD and bipolar disorder. He began self-medicating with narcotics and developed an addiction. Because of that mental illness and addiction, he spent most of my life in and out of the criminal legal system. And even at the age of 9, I knew that that was wrong. I knew it was wrong that someone who was mentally ill and addicted would be incarcerated instead of rehabilitated. It was at that moment that I decided to dedicate my life to criminal justice reform. I believe the most important thing that I can do is change the culture of prosecution. We have a culture of prosecution that is focused on incarceration more than it is anything else. We have monetized the incarceration of people. In Florida, we spend $2.4 billion a year on our prison industry, and less than 3% of that goes towards programming to make individuals better when they return to society. When we dehumanize offenders and take them into the criminal legal system, not calling them by their name, but calling them defendant, not calling them by their name, but calling them inmate, not calling them by their names, but calling them by a number. But then when they are released back into our society, as so many of them are, within 3 to 5 years, we expect them to behave like human beings when we told them for so many years that they were not human. We have to focus on rehabilitation and treatment as an alternative to incarceration. And by doing that, we will decrease recidivism and increase public safety, building stronger and safer communities. You know, having a progressive elected official in any area benefits the community, but particularly as it relates to a state attorney or district attorney, it allows us to turn back the hands of time and undo the damage that's been done from failed criminal justice policies, from the war on drugs to mass incarceration. In this time, I don't have a familiar name. I don't have a familiar face, but I stand for a cause that we should all stand for. And my entire career shows that that is all I have ever done. And although now some of my opponents may say, yes, criminal justice reform because it's the hot topic to talk about, my entire career has been based on criminal justice reform. Visit my website at moniqueforstateattorney.com and get involved in my race, because we need numbers to reach the voters so that we can bring this election home and be successful and bring justice to our community.